everyone, welcome to your weekly college basketball bracketology update with America's number one bracketologist, Bracket Dom of bracketometry.com. Ranked 124 spots better than ESPN's Joe Lenardi and 178 spots better than CBS's Jerry Palm, according to the Bracket Matrix. So if you really want to know where your team stands, you've come to the right place. How you doing, buddy?
Doing fantastic. How about yourself?
Great. We're now halfway through February. March is right around the corner. And aside from getting excited that we are approaching Selection Sunday, do you like this time of year more than November, or do you sort of see consequences of games?
Yeah, no, this is the best time of the year. And honestly, as a bracketologist, you could argue that this time of year is just as exciting as March Madness itself, because this is really where all the teams are jockeying for position. Teams are fighting to be in, to be out, who to be seated where. This is where really it becomes overdrive, and you have to lock into everything. So, yeah, I'm excited for what the next month has to bring.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I mean, let's just get right into it, right? I mean, people are here for the bracket. So let's see. Now, it is tough this time of year because I feel like as soon as you release it, it's like it's sort of like the stock market price. It's sort of like obsolete when the market, because the market's always going right now during games. So this is as up to date as we can get right now. So take a quick look here we'll talk briefly about the top seeds, of course, and then there's the bracket for those of you watching on YouTube or X or wherever you might be. Of course, feel free to comment and leave some questions if you want for Dom. We'll look at the one line. Michigan now is an overall number 1 seed. You have got Duke, then Arizona, and then Connecticut, and we'll come back to this in a little bit. So obviously Michigan wins a big game in Mackey. They're just kind of rolling over everybody at this point. They look like they sort of were not leaking oil, but they just didn't look quite as smooth. They just seem like they're back in form again. And Duke, of course, Arizona loses. But that was their second loss of the season, which was kind of a surprising one. I know they're playing BYU tonight at home, but you have Michigan Duke, which strangely they're going to play each other, which is really weird for in season.
Yeah, no, that's going to be a fantastic game. I love that just happened to be scheduled this year, and this year it just happens to potentially be a preview of the national championship in a random February out-of-conference game. Now, if you're a fan of one of those teams thinking like, oh, man, why did we schedule this year? We're set as a 1 seed right now, it looks like, and now that's a game we could lose. I wouldn't worry about that. This is really just jockeying for number 1 overall, it seems like at this point. I think both of those teams are feeling pretty set as a number 1 overall seed, even if it were to be a blowout when those two go head to head, just with where their resumes are compared to the rest.
Yeah, because I think last year Duke beat Illinois by about 40 points. It was like the most ridiculous sort of obliteration. Now that Illinois was certainly not sitting at the 1 line along with Duke, but anyway, so either way, these are teams, and I think you've mentioned before, if you're a 1A matchup, it doesn't matter where you play. It's still a 1A matchup, right? You're just whether you're at home or on the road, so you know. It's okay.
Yeah, if they're top 15 in the net, then you can play them absolutely anywhere, and it's a Q1A game regardless. Now, and obviously a road win against like someone who's 5 in the net, the committee will view a little more favorably than a home win, even though they're both in the same Q1A grouping, as you would call it. But still, when you're just looking at the overall data, it doesn't make too much of a difference.
Now, interestingly, I think as we're recording this right now, this is Thursday evening, the 18th. I think I had not checked the final score, but Connecticut was down by 8 points with like 20 seconds left. Did they end up losing, I imagine, to Creighton?
They did end up losing, yes, at home. And that would currently be a quad 3 loss, which usually is something unprecedented for teams that are on the 1 seed line this late into the season. And especially if they want to hold on to that 1 seed. And I would say pretty comfortably at this point, they're not going to anymore. They'd kind of been playing with fire. It seemed like inevitably UConn would get past at some point. Had Houston won at Iowa State the other night, I think they would have jumped them already. And I think this finally knocks them off the 1 line. Now, that they just got that win over UConn, that could end up only being a Q2 loss because that could improve their net, but I still don't think that would be enough to save them, it only being a Q2 loss. That's still pretty damaging when you're fighting for a 1 seed, even though it doesn't sound like that bad of a loss. So, yeah, I think we're going to see a new team on the 1 line next week. And Houston has an absolute chance. I know they lost to Iowa State, but I still had them slightly ahead of Iowa State, and they have Arizona coming up. So if they beat Arizona, Houston's probably going to be that new one.
Now, do you see so like looking at the two line right now, you have Houston, Iowa State, Purdue, Illinois. Do you envision if if uh, if Houston wins, let's say they beat Arizona, does Arizona get knocked on to the 2, or do they just swap spots, or do you still have Connecticut going, UConn staying down, and then Arizona just hang on to the last 1 spot?
No, I still think there's a decent jump to Arizona as well. I think there's kind of 3 teams clearly a 1 seed right now, and even with their 2 recent losses, I'd say Arizona is still a decent chunk ahead of Connecticut, and they even were before tonight. So really, I think the game against Arizona is going to be a 1 seed regardless. It more matters for Houston. If they beat Arizona this weekend, they're probably joining Arizona on the 1 line. But if they lose, then it might be Iowa State now actually over Houston after beating them the other night, snagging that final 1. And I would not have expected Iowa State to be moving up to my 1 line a couple weeks ago, but they certainly have an opportunity to do it now. So,
yeah. And then looking at rounding up the rest of the brackets there, when you look at the 3 and 4 lines. So, well, first of all, you have, of course, Purdue and Illinois, Big Ten teams. On the three line, you have Florida, then Nebraska, Kansas, Texas Tech. Then you have Gonzaga on the 4 line, along with Vanderbilt, Michigan State, and Virginia. I mean, the noticeable thing, of course, you have 5 Big Ten teams, 5 Big 12 teams. Then you've got 2 from the ACC, 2 from the SEC, and then you got WCC and a Big East. A lot of representation of the Big Ten and the Big 12. I mean, clearly at the top, at least, these are the best conferences, right? I mean, by far.
Oh, yeah. And I remember when we were doing our conference rankings at the start of the season, before we even started getting into conference play, we said that those are pretty clearly the top conferences. And I don't think that anything we've seen in conference play has changed that. The top teams have continued to stay the top teams. And I expect them to continue to have a lot of representation, not just at the top of the bracket, but throughout the entire bracket. They're going to be filling up a lot of spots, especially with the mid-majors struggling this year as well.
Right, exactly. And I guess just a quick question about Michigan State. So you have them down to the 4 seed. I mean, they have some really tough schedule coming up. They're at home against Ohio State and Rutgers, which are 2 games they should have handled. But then they've got their trip to Indiana, where they play Indiana and Purdue, and then of course finish the season at Michigan. How many games does Michigan State need to? I guess the question is, how far can Michigan State move up? Can they get to a 2 line? Are they, if they went all 5, let's say, and then how far can they fall if they were to lose? Let's just assume they lose the 3 road games.
That's 100%. That gauntlet of a schedule they have coming up certainly gives them the opportunity to still fly right up the seed list. I mean, that would still be 1, 2, 3 quad 1A games that they have left. If they were to win out, I do think that they would jump up to a 2 seed. It is pretty tight between that 2 through 4 line. So they certainly have an opportunity to move up, and really more of an opportunity to move up than to fall down. And unless they were to lose, let's say, at home to Ohio State or at home to Rutgers, as long as they take care of business in those games, even if they were to lose every single one of those quad 1 games the rest of the way, they probably fall to a 5 at worst. So opportunity to go up to a 2, 5 at the absolute worst, as long as they don't lose any of those games that they shouldn't lose.
Well, that certainly makes me feel better as a Michigan State fan. So let's talk some bubble here, and we'll go to the last 4 in. Right now you have, and as of this morning or something, Missouri as the you have in the order Missouri, UCLA, TCU, and Virginia Tech is the very last of the last 4. I guess give us a rundown of those teams. I mean, UCLA looks. I'm going to guess they're not going to make the tournament just because their schedule is pretty tough. And they just don't seem like they have enough firepower right now, at least, in what I've watched in the Big Ten. But I generally spend time watching the Big Ten. Talk about the other teams and UCLA too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just said it. Yeah, Michigan State just trounced UCLA the other night, and this bracket came out before that game. Now, what could certainly help a team like UCLA is that pretty much everyone in that graphic that you just showed lost the other night. Virginia Tech, they're the ones that have to be kicking themselves the most. They lost by 1 at Miami last night, and that's a game where had you won that, you probably would have moved out of the last 4 in completely. Now, it's not a bad loss. They might still barely hang on to that spot, but yeah, they certainly had an opportunity with a lot of the other teams around them losing. And Missouri, they're playing tonight. They're currently losing right now. And who was the last one in there? TCU. Yeah, TCU lost last night as well. They lost to UCF. So if Missouri loses tonight, all 4 teams in that last 4 in, since I released that bracket to like an hour from now, every single one would have lost. So then you look to, oh, who's that going to invite to come in? Maybe San Diego State? No, they lose at home to Grand Canyon last night as well. So no one wants to make this tournament this year. I think the main benefit of this is that everyone who's clamoring to expand the tournament, this is the perfect year to show that we don't need to do that, because I'm going to be struggling to put some of these last teams in at the moment if everyone keeps falling out. Santa Clara probably is the biggest winner out of all of this. I thought they might have really shot themselves in the foot not taking advantage of that opportunity they had against Gonzaga last weekend that probably would have had them pretty solidly in, but now they're right back there in the mix. I'd probably have them in the field if I were to remake it today. And now it's kind of move on to the St. Mary's game that they have coming up next. And that's the one that they probably need to win to be in now instead of the Gonzaga one that they dropped.
Right. And you have New Mexico has just been hanging there. They've been just lingering there all season. And I suspect they're going to be there, or at least another Mountain West team is going to be on that bubble.
Yeah, New Mexico's got to feel really good. I mean, I know it hurts the Mountain West profile as a whole when San Diego State loses, but if you think of it from the perspective of, oh, well, some Mountain West team has to be there in the bubble. I know the committee doesn't look at it that way, but maybe in the back of their minds they do. Well, now they're clearly the one that would get in if there was a second Mountain West team behind Utah State. So, yeah, and with all the teams above them losing as well, good for New Mexico and good for Cal, too. They have a pretty winnable schedule down the stretch. I had them as my first team out, and down the stretch they get Stanford, SMU, Pitt, Georgia Tech, and Wake Forest. Now, you could look at that as a positive or a negative. They don't really have that many chances for big quality wins the rest of the way, but if everyone else is going to keep losing ahead of them, they don't need those big quality wins. They just need wins in general, and those are certainly games they should win. So Cal, just take care of business, and you might just backdoor your way into the field.
Sometimes it's all you got to do, right? It's everyone takes one step backwards. You just stand still and you're like, okay, I guess I'm the guy.
You're in. Exactly. And Cal might be the perfect representation of that this year.
All right. We'll hit some listener questions here. We'll begin with this one, which is there a team, if there's a team above your 10 line currently that ends up missing the tourney, who do you think that would be? So I assume this means someone a 9 seed or better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people are looking at Auburn just because, they have so many losses, but they've also played pretty much in a really, really tough schedule. And there's every single year, I feel like there's one of those teams that everyone in the media and the fans are clamoring, hey, this team belongs nowhere near the tournament. Look at their overall record. And they're not really looking at what those wins and losses are. And then they end up in an 8-9 game. And that probably is what Auburn is going to be this year. If I really was looking at one, let's go back to the Big Ten and talk about Indiana. I think they're one that I currently have as a 9 seed right now that certainly has the schedule down the stretch that could play themselves out. And they still have 2 quad 3 games against some feisty Northwestern and Minnesota teams to where if they were to drop one of those, that would really hurt their profile. And outside of that, every single one of their other games is quad 1 games that they're probably going to be underdogs in, against Michigan State, away at Purdue, at Ohio State. I mean, even just beating Northwestern and Minnesota, but losing all those quad 1 games might just allow enough other bubble teams to jump and pass them. Now, maybe not if they all keep losing like happened last night. That 2-3 could maybe still be enough for Indiana just to barely hold on for a bid, but that just looks like a scary schedule because I could also easily see them lose one of those Q3 games and lose all 3 quad 1 games that I don't see them winning, and then they're probably out for sure. So Indiana needs to lock in down the stretch.
That's going to be certainly concerning for Michigan State fans since they're going to be traveling to Bloomington not too long from now. Of course, Indiana's going to be heading to Mackey in West Lafayette to take on the rivals. And I think they've taken 3 straight against Purdue. I believe they swept them last year and they took the first matchup this year, I think. So they got their number, although I really do think Purdue's a better team. It's just kind of a weird game. But that's, college basketball. That's the whole thing.
Home court advantage. I don't think they get the win at Purdue, but you're right. As a Michigan State fan, that'd be one I would sweat about a little bit just because Indiana might know, hey, we need to win this game to feel comfortable about our tournament hopes, or at the very least feel comfortable about not being in a play-in game. So they're going to be going all out in that one, but I still like the Sparty's chances.
All right, so let's move on. The next question is, and we got a couple of these in Miami, Ohio. So the first one is, if Miami, Ohio wins out, so right now they're 25-0, I think, or 24, 25-0. They have 5 regular season games, and then I think the MAC tournament.
Yeah.
How high can they go in your seating now? You keep saying everybody's losing. So if they keep winning, now they're playing quad 3. These are quad 3, probably most of the games, maybe quad 2 sometimes. But where do you see Miami as their ceiling?
Yeah, I mean, people probably think there's not much more of a ceiling because they've kind of hovered around that 11 line all year. But the middle of the seed list really is an absolute cluster. I mean, like all the way from 6 to 10 to even the top of the 11, there's not too much separating them. And then there's kind of a big gulf to the top 1 through 5 seeds. So if the committee is kind of looking for something to separate a team in that middle cluster, being undefeated with good resume metrics would certainly be that thing to set a team apart. So if they do actually complete the undefeated season, that could give them some brownie points and bump them up there. I could see them maybe move to as high as a 7. I would guess they're probably in an 8-9 game if they win out, but a 7 is certainly possible if they get other results around them that they need. So, yeah, I think a 7's their ceiling, and I would probably expect an 8 or 9 game if they win out. I think the committee also just is going to look at those predictive metrics that are really poor and probably aren't going to want to put them in a game where they're the higher seed, where they're inevitably going to end up being an underdog. Like they would probably be an underdog against a lot of those 10 seeds out there right now. If you're an 8-9 game, those are, you never know which way those are going to go anyway. So I feel like that's probably the highest the committee would feel comfortable putting them, just with their predictive metrics.
And because really, you look at in the MAC, I think the only other sub 3-digit net team is Akron, right? So I guess does a 7 seed just require them? Do you think maybe beating Akron in the conference tournament somewhere, like at the championship game?
For sure. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think if they won out but didn't beat Akron in the final, then it's probably an 8 at max. They have to get another quad 2 win against Akron just to add that to the resume and kind of boost up the metrics a little bit more. Because honestly, I think if they played right now, Akron might even be a small favorite on a neutral court. So if they prove that wrong and beat them the second time around, then I think that might help boost those metrics that are currently holding their ceiling down right now.
Speaking of that, do you feel comfortable with Miami still getting at large with a loss anywhere in the MAC tournament? So let's see if if they lose at Akron, you feel like, sounds like you've been pretty confident that they're in. If they're going undefeated at this point, lose the MAC tournament, say the championship going to Akron, both teams are in. You have the Akron with the AQ, and so Miami be a bid stealer. But how about Miami loses to, I don't know, Western Michigan or someone else in somehow, some first round game?
I still think they'd be fine if that was their only loss. I think the only way Miami of Ohio starts getting into sweaty territory is if they lose their first regular season game and then a conference tournament game and ends up with 2 losses. And even in that scenario, I still think they're probably fine. As long as neither of those losses are quad 4. And then that's where it would start getting a little questionable. Like, say they lose at Western Michigan in the regular season, that'd be a quad 4 loss. And then they lose in the MAC tournament, like a quad 3 loss. And I still think you probably have to be in as just 2 losses in the whole year. But now that's 2 bad losses that you're looking at, with one of them in quad 4, which is usually a death blow to mid-majors. So I'd be a little more iffy then, but I think as long as the game they lose in the regular season is one of their remaining quad 3 games, they're probably safe to lose in the tournament and still sneak in, maybe as a play-in game though.
Right. Sure. Yeah. I have to assume they're going to be a playing game if they're an at-large bid at this point.
I would say they could get an at-large, but not be in a play-in if they go undefeated in the regular season.
Okay.
And then lose that one game in the MAC tournament, then maybe they're an 11 or a 10, but they still get a straight bye. But yeah, if they lose 2 down the stretch, they're probably a play-in game if they do get in.
All right, so moving on to the A10, we've got St. Louis, which is just tearing it up. They finally lost I think their first regular conference game just recently. How many more? So, let's assume they lose in the A10 conference, so they don't get the automatic bid. How many more losses can they take in the regular season and still make it in as an at-large team?
Yeah, I still think they could probably handle a few more losses and be just fine. They're a team that probably before last night was getting pretty close to lock territory. And if you look at a lot of the remaining games, they're mostly Q2 games. I think the only ones that aren't they have 3 quad 2 games left, 1 quad 3 game, and 1 Q4 game. Now, you lose that Q4 game to Loyola Chicago, then we're talking a different story. But they could lose at least 2 more games down the stretch and in the A10 tournament. And I'm still pretty confident about them getting a bid, barring any of those being horrible losses. They just have such a strong resume overall. The metrics, the predictives, and the resumes are all in the 20s. They have multiple Q1 wins. They're 2-0 in quad 1. They're 3-2 in quad 2. And so, yeah, they could lose, I'd say, 2 more regular season games and a conference tournament game, and I'd still have no question about them getting in. They could maybe even lose more than that. I would have to see what happens to the metrics at that point. But if you're a St. Louis fan starting to sweat getting a bid at this point after that loss last night, I wouldn't sweat it at all. They're still in a fantastic spot.
Okay.
Because even that loss to Rhode Island, that was a Q2 loss. That's not even a bad loss. Their resume is not even much worse now.
Certainly would have been worse had it been at home, right? That's
for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So then moving on, here's someone that seems a little salty. Why do you have Santa Clara lower than other bracketologists? I mean, I know you're number 1, but why? Like Santa Clara? What's your deal?
It's actually a funny transition. We were just talking about St. Louis and saying, oh, they're almost completely fine. The only thing that could really hurt them is if they lose that quad 4 game to Loyola Chicago they have down the stretch. Well, transition it to Santa Clara, who has a quad 4 loss to, you guessed it, Loyola Chicago. And that is not just a Q4 loss. That if Q5 was a thing, that would be a Q5 loss. They're almost like the bottom team in the net. And I just, in my mind, I think the committee is going to punish them extra hard for that. I mean, not only do we have the historical precedent of a Q4 loss is almost, like I said, a death blow to mid-majors. Like they'll treat it like 3 quad 3 losses almost. And other bracketologists is, of course, factoring that in. But that's been the case even when it's a borderline quad 4 loss. That one is just a catastrophically bad loss. And then you factor on top of that they only have 1 quad 1 win, and it's against St. Mary's. And that's barely a quad 1 win. You got to factor that in as well, that if St. Mary's loses another game down the stretch and falls out of the top 30 of the net, they might not even have a quad 1 win. And I don't think anyone's even putting them near the field if that was the case. So sometimes when I'm doing my bracketology, I kind of got to balance the fact that, yeah, this is a quad 1 win, but I don't want to give too much weight to it because it might not be one for long potentially. So I think just factoring in that they only have the 1 quad 1 win and it's barely one, and they have the quad 4 loss that's worse than most quad 4 losses, which is crazy. That's just why I'm a bit lower on them. But like we said earlier, when we were talking about the bubble teams, they might be in my field next week anyway, just with everyone ahead of them losing. So you still got to feel good if you're a Santa Clara fan. And I think if they end up getting the sweep against St. Mary's, they're probably in at that point. So they control their destiny for sure without having
I think certainly
Gonzaga.
Right. And I feel like one of the difficult things for your job is, you have a team in and sort of like the top 25, you have, if someone's ranked 10th, they lose 2 games. Well, they're still probably top 25 somewhere. You just move them down.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to just like, this is not the top 25 team anymore. They're just, they're the 27th best. It's hard to sort of move someone completely out of the field, right? You want to move teams incrementally, and because it's sort of like accepting the fact that you were wrong the week before in a way, I'm sure, like,
fair enough.
Right. Yeah. All right. So the final question we have someone on Twitter dropped a question too, but so who is Florida chasing for a 2 seed? So Florida's sitting at the 3. We've got, as you mentioned before, Houston, Iowa State, and then you've got Purdue and Illinois as a 2 seeds. I imagine it's going to be one of the Big Ten teams, which probably one of them is going to falter at some point.
Well, and one of them did, I guess, quote unquote, falter last night. Purdue had their chance against Michigan at home and lost that game. Obviously, that's not a bad loss. And I still think they might be right there in the mix to even stay ahead of Florida. But with that loss, I mean, now that just kind of gives Florida the opportunity to pass them with a quality win themselves. So I would say more likely than not now, Purdue is the one they're chasing. That's not a bad loss, but they were so neck and neck with Illinois. I think that does jump Illinois over them to where now Purdue would be that last 2 seed, if not the first 3 seed, if Florida were already ahead of them now. I'd have to relook at those resumes since that loss, but it's probably pretty close between Florida and Purdue at this point. But certainly that could all change. Illinois takes a loss that they're not supposed to. Florida could easily pass them as well. So I'd say they're chasing both. But really just those two. I think Houston and Iowa State are kind of more in contention to go up to a 1 at this point than to drop back to a 3. And wild card answer to that too. Now that UConn just took that bad loss, that Q3 loss at home, they take another bad loss like that, like say next week, they could drop all the way down to a 3. Just because they've been a 1 for so long doesn't mean they're safe from a multi-seed line jump this late into the season. Because that usually doesn't happen, but it could if you keep racking up bad losses. So, yeah, maybe UConn as well.
Yeah, interesting. And I feel like, it's been weird for at least looking at the Purdue. They've had a lot of bad losses at home. I mean, losing to Michigan is no shame, but it wasn't really competitive. I mean, they were down double digits the entire game at home, and they just got smoked by Iowa State early this season. Usually they're sort of wall of invincibility in Mackey, and it just has not been the case this year. They've almost lost to Oregon. I mean, they've really struggled at home, which is just weird. And then, so we have a question from Sean Dillon from Host Beyond the Mic, who asks, which teams are hearing the bubble death knell?
I mean, at this point, I don't think any of
the entire bubble.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's almost gone full circle with all of them hearing that. Then it's almost like none of them are, because it's like, oh, we just took a loss that's going to knock us out for sure. But hey, everyone else did too. So we're still here. Yeah, you think teams would be getting knocked out left and right. But if they all get knocked out, someone still has to make it. So really, if you're a bubble team and you lost, you're not dead yet with everyone else losing too.
It's funny too, because I feel like, was it, how long ago was it when UCLA made it they made it to the national championship game from the 11 seed, from the play-in game? I think or did they make the Final Four? Maybe it's the Final Four.
Oh yeah. Final Four. Yeah.
And I just feel like these teams right now we're talking about are teams that I can't conceive of them even winning like 1 or 2 games. These bubble teams are really weak. I mean, and to expand the league, the conference, or the tournament, like you said, another 4 or 8 teams. What are you adding? There's no
I don't even really see anyone below like a 6 seed this year. It seems like once you get down to the 7 seeds, now we're getting into some bad teams. It's pretty top heavy this year. And yeah, and those 7, 10, 8, 9 games might be all-time classics when we get into the tournament, but I don't see many 1s or 2 seeds losing before the Sweet 16 this year. It's going to be a lot of high seeds in the later rounds.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. And just again, a quick reminder to head on over to X, where you can find Dom and his picks. You can go at Bracket Dom, or of course you can hit him up an email. I imagine now we're starting to get more questions already, so we'll address them as many as we can. So make sure when he'll put his bracket, usually what's like Monday or Tuesday it comes out, and then
Tuesday. Yeah.
So drop your question below. He'll probably answer, but you will also answer here too. And Sean Dillon mentioned it was 2021 that UCLA pulled that off. So again, just a reminder to check us out. We'll be back next week, and keep your brackets clean, folks. And we will see you as we get ever closer to Selection Sunday in March. See you later.
See you later.